It didn't start with calm. It started with tension that hadn't faded. Olivia stood at the doorway, her hand gripping the bag tightly, her body still, but her mind racing. The night air felt colder than it should have, pressing against her skin like a warning she couldn't ignore. Everything that had just happened replayed in fragments, too fast to process, too heavy to understand. James stood in front of her, not blocking her, not stopping her, just there. But he wasn't the same man anymore. He looked the same. Same face. Same quiet expression. Same controlled breathing. But something underneath had shifted. Something she couldn't unsee. Behind him, the men waited. Still. Silent. Watching. Not as equals. Not as strangers. As people who answered to him. "Sir," one of them had said. That word echoed in her mind louder than everything else. "Sir." It didn't belong to the man who had sat in her kitchen. It didn't belong to the man she had helped, fed, trusted. And yet it fit too well. Olivia swallowed slowly, forcing her voice to stay steady. "You should have told me." The words came out quieter than she expected, but they carried weight. Not anger, not shouting, just something deeper, something harder to fix. James didn't look away. "I know. No excuses. No explanations." That made it worse. Her eyes searched his face, looking for something familiar, something she could hold on to. But the more she looked, the more distant he felt. "You let me believe you were nothing," she said. "Just someone who needed help." A brief pause. "I didn't need help," he replied. The answer was simple, honest, and still not enough. Olivia let out a breath that almost turned into a bitter laugh. "That's not the point." Silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. She glanced past him, at the cars lined up outside. Black, clean, unmarked, engines still warm. Doors slightly open like they had arrived in a hurry and hadn't bothered hiding it. This wasn't normal. None of it was. Her chest tightened as realization began to settle deeper. Every moment she had shared with him started to shift in meaning. The way he avoided questions. The way he watched everything. The way he stayed calm, even when things didn't make sense. Not lost, not confused, calculated. Her grip on the bag tightened again. "You lied," she said. "I didn't," he answered, calm but firm. "I just didn't tell you everything." She shook her head immediately. "That's the same thing." Again, he didn't argue, because he knew it was. The men behind him remained still, but their attention had sharpened. Their eyes moved between Olivia and James like they were measuring something, waiting for a moment to shift. Olivia noticed it, and it made her more uneasy. This wasn't just about him anymore. Something else was happening. Something bigger. A sudden sound cut through the silence. A phone ringing. One of the men stepped aside quickly, answering it in a low voice. His posture changed almost instantly, subtle but clear. His shoulders stiffened, his tone sharpened, and whatever calm had been there before disappeared. Olivia felt it before she understood it. Something was wrong. The man ended the call and turned back toward James. "Sir," he said again. This time, there was no hesitation. James's expression didn't change, but his focus sharpened. "What is it?" A brief pause. "They've picked up movement." The words were simple, but they carried something heavy. Olivia frowned slightly. "Movement? What does that mean?" No one answered her right away. That silence felt familiar. Too familiar. James held the man's gaze for a second longer. "Where?" Closer than expected. The air shifted. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it changed everything. Olivia's heartbeat quickened. "Can someone explain what's going on?" Still no immediate answer. That's when it hit her. This wasn't just about who James was. It was about why people were looking for him. James finally looked back at her, and for the first time since everything was revealed, there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Not control, not distance, concern. "They weren't just searching for me," he said quietly. Her stomach dropped. "What?" He didn't look away this time. "They were watching anyone connected to me." The words sank in slowly, too slowly. Her fingers loosened around the bag before tightening again. Her home, her child, her life. Everything she thought was separate from his world suddenly didn't feel separate anymore. "You're saying they know about us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. James didn't soften it, didn't try to protect her from it. "Yes," The answer was direct, unavoidable. Olivia took a step back, her breathing unsteady now. No, that's not possible. But deep down, she already knew. The cars, the men, the urgency, none of it pointed to something small. This was bigger than she had allowed herself to imagine. Her thoughts raced, trying to catch up with a reality that no longer felt stable. "This isn't over," James said. She looked at him sharply. "It was supposed to be." "I know," he replied, but his tone said something else. It said he never really believed that. The men behind him began to move slightly, adjusting positions, scanning the surroundings with quiet precision. Not panic, not fear, preparation. That scared her more than anything. Olivia looked at them, then back at James. "What kind of life are you involved in?" He didn't answer immediately, and that hesitation said more than words ever could. Because whatever the truth was, it was worse than she expected. The wind shifted slightly, brushing past her as if trying to push her forward, to force her to leave before it was too late. But her feet didn't move. Because now, leaving didn't feel like an escape. It felt like stepping into something unknown. James took a small step closer, careful, measured. "Olivia." She didn't respond. Didn't look at him the same way anymore. Because something had changed. Not just him. Everything. The man she trusted was never just a stranger. And the danger she thought had ended had only been waiting, watching, getting closer. And now, it wasn't just his problem anymore. It was hers too. Because the truth didn't fix anything. It made everything worse. The next morning didn't feel like a new beginning. It felt like something unfinished. The house was quieter than usual. Not peaceful, just careful. Olivia moved slowly through the kitchen, placing a cup on the table, her movements controlled, deliberate, as if any sudden action might break whatever fragile balance remained. James stood near the window, not sitting, not relaxed, watching, not just the street, everything. She noticed it, the way his eyes shifted, the way his body stayed ready. It wasn't normal. But then again, nothing was anymore. "You don't have to stay here," Olivia said without looking at him. Her tone was neutral, not cold, not warm, just distant. "I know," James replied. But he didn't move. That was the pattern now. She set boundaries. He respected them, but he didn't leave. Because leaving wasn't an option. Not after what he had said. Not after what she now knew. A small voice broke the silence. "Are you still hurt?" Olivia turned slightly. Her child stood in the doorway, looking at James. Not afraid, not confused, just curious. James's expression softened immediately. "A little," he said gently. The child walked closer. Slow, careful. "But you're better," the small voice added. James nodded. "I'm getting there." That was enough. The child smiled slightly. And in that moment, something shifted. Not between Olivia and James, but between him and the child. It was easier, simpler. No history, no betrayal, just presence. Olivia watched it quietly, and something inside her tightened. Because it shouldn't have been that easy. Trust didn't rebuild that fast. Not after everything. But children didn't see lies the same way. They saw actions, tone, feeling. And right now, James felt safe. That was the problem. Later that day, they moved. Not far, but enough. A smaller place. Cleaner. Quieter. Temporary. That's what James had called it. Just until things settle. Olivia hadn't argued. She hadn't agreed either. She just accepted. Because staying where they were was no longer possible. Boxes sat unopened near the wall. The space felt unfamiliar, but not unsafe. And that mattered. James stood near the door again. Same position, different place. Always watching. "You don't have to do that," Olivia said. This time, she looked at him. "I know," he replied again. But he didn't stop. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You say that a lot," she added. A small pause. "Because it's true," he said. Silence followed. Not heavy, but not comfortable either. "You're still doing it," she said quietly. "Doing what?" "Deciding things without me." That landed. He didn't answer right away. Because she wasn't wrong. I'm trying to keep you safe, he said finally. Her expression didn't change. I didn't ask for that, she replied. The words weren't sharp, but they carried weight. And for the first time, he didn't have a response. Because protection was the only thing he knew how to offer. But now, it wasn't enough. Hours passed. The tension didn't disappear. It just settled, like something waiting. The child laughed from the other room. A soft sound. Light. Normal. Olivia closed her eyes briefly. That sound mattered. More than anything else. And she knew, keeping that safe was the only priority. Even if it meant accepting help she didn't fully trust. Even if it meant staying close to someone she didn't fully understand. That evening, the air felt calmer. Not because things were fixed, but because nothing had gone wrong. Yet, they sat outside for a moment. Not together, but near. A quiet distance between them. The sky dimmed slowly. Soft light fading into night. It's different now, Olivia said. Her voice was quieter, less guarded. James nodded. It is. Another pause. Not awkward. Just unfinished. You really didn't want me to know? She asked. He looked at her. No. Why? A breath. Because everything changes once you do. She held his gaze. It already did. That truth stayed between them. Unavoidable. Unfixable. From inside, the child called out again. Olivia stood. I'll be back, she said. James nodded, watching her walk away. Not stopping her. Not following. Just letting her go. For now. The moment stretched. Quiet. Still. Until something shifted. Subtle. Easy to miss. Across the street, a figure stood near a parked car. Still. Watching. James noticed instantly. His posture changed. Not obvious, but precise. Focused. His eyes locked onto the figure. And the figure didn't move. Didn't look away. Didn't hide. Just watched. Long enough to be intentional. Then, slowly, the car door opened. The figure got in, and the vehicle drove off. Calm. Controlled. Like it had never been there. James didn't move. Didn't speak. But something inside him shifted. Because that wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. It was confirmation. Inside, Olivia's voice echoed softly. Calling her child. Unaware. Still holding on to the idea that things might settle. That this could pass. But outside, James stood still. Eyes fixed on the empty street. Because now he knew they weren't alone. And they hadn't been for a while. Someone was watching them. The street returned to silence. Too quiet. James didn't move from his position. His eyes stayed fixed on the spot where the car had been. Gone, but not forgotten. He exhaled slowly. Measured. Controlled. That wasn't random. That wasn't curiosity. That was surveillance. Inside the house, Olivia's voice carried faintly, calm, unaware, trying to hold on to something normal that no longer existed. James turned slightly toward the door. For a second, he considered saying something. Warning her. Explaining everything. But not like this. Not yet. Because once he said it, there would be no going back. A soft vibration pulled his attention. His phone. He looked down at the screen. No name. Just a secure line. He answered immediately. Talk. A pause. Then a voice. Low. Professional. They've expanded the search. James's expression didn't change. Define expanded. Another pause. They're not just tracking financial trails anymore. They've activated field teams. That confirmed it. This had escalated. Locations. James asked. Multiple regions. But one pattern stands out. James waited. They're closing in on your last known movement. His grip tightened slightly around the phone. And they're not the only ones. Silence. That part mattered more. Who else? James asked. The answer came slower this time. Careful. We intercepted chatter from a private network. A beat. A name came up. James already knew. But he needed to hear it. Say it. Another pause. Victor Hale. The name landed quietly. But it carried weight. Danger. History. James closed his eyes briefly. Of all the possibilities, it had to be him. That's not possible, James said under his breath. He disappeared 2 years ago. That's what everyone believed, the voice replied. But he's active again. The line went silent for a second. Then, he's leading this. That changed everything. James opened his eyes. Sharp. Focused. Victor Hale wasn't just a rival. He was something worse. A man who didn't lose. A man who didn't forget. And more importantly, a man who knew how to wait. James turned slightly, looking back at the house. At the place Olivia thought was temporary. Safe. It wasn't. Not anymore. Pull everything you have, James said. I want movements, contacts, patterns. Anything that connects him to this. Already working on it. And tighten the perimeter, James added. There was a slight hesitation on the other end. We've already increased presence. Do more. This time, no hesitation. Understood. The line disconnected. James lowered the phone slowly. His jaw tightened. This wasn't just about being found anymore. This was targeted. Planned. Personal. Inside, Olivia stepped back into the living space. She paused when she saw him. Still near the door. Still watching. You've been out here a while, she said. Her tone carried curiosity now, mixed with something else. Concern. James turned to her. For a second, he considered lying again, telling her it was nothing. But that wasn't an option anymore. Not after everything. We need to talk, he said. That was enough to shift the air instantly. Olivia's expression tightened. About what? She asked. But she already knew. This wasn't small. Not anymore. James stepped inside slowly, closing the door behind him. A small action, but it felt final. It didn't stop looking for me, he said. Olivia crossed her arms slightly. I figured that much. It's more than that. A pause. They know where I've been. Her breath caught. And they're getting closer. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Real. Who is they? She asked. That question mattered. Because the answer would change everything again. James held her gaze. Not just authorities, he said. Not just people trying to find me. A beat. Someone else is involved. Her eyes narrowed slightly. What kind of someone? James didn't look away. The kind that doesn't follow rules. That was enough. Fear crept in quietly. Not loud. Not sudden. But deep. Olivia's mind raced. This is about your past, isn't it? She asked. James didn't answer immediately. Because it wasn't just his past. It was everything connected to it. Before I disappeared, he said slowly, there were conflicts. Business? She asked. Power, he corrected. That word changed the meaning. People lost things when I walked away, he continued. Money, influence, control. A pause. And some of them didn't take it well. Olivia shook her head slightly. You're saying someone is coming after you because of that? Yes. The answer was simple. Too simple. And now, they know about us, she added. James didn't deny it. Because denying it would be another lie. A small sound came from the hallway. The child. Unaware. Still safe. For now. Olivia's expression shifted. From confusion to realization. Then to fear. Real fear. What happens when they get here? She asked quietly. James didn't answer right away. Because the truth wasn't something she was ready to hear. But he couldn't hide it anymore. They won't come to talk, he said. That was enough. Olivia looked away. Processing. Trying to hold onto control. But it was slipping. Fast. Outside, far from the quiet street, in a different part of the city, a black SUV came to a stop. The engine cut. Silence followed. Inside, a man sat in the back seat. Still, composed, watching a tablet screen. On it, a blurred image. Then another. Clearer. A house. A street. And finally, a frame that didn't move. James. Standing outside. The man's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened slightly. Confirm it, he said calmly. The man in the front seat nodded. It's him. A pause. No surprise. No reaction. Just certainty. The man in the back leaned back slightly. Relaxed. Like this moment had been expected. Like it had already been decided. His fingers tapped lightly against the armrest. Slow. Controlled. Then he spoke again. Two simple words. Quiet. Final. We found him. It didn't happen all at once. It happened quietly, almost gently, the kind of change that hides itself behind good intentions. At first, it looked like help. A car parked outside a little longer than usual. A man standing across the street, pretending to scroll through his phone. Another walking past the house more than once. His steps too measured to be casual. Small things. Easy to ignore. But Olivia noticed. She always noticed. By the second day, it was no longer subtle. The locks on the doors had been changed, stronger, quieter, unfamiliar under her hands. The windows now had sensors, tiny blinking lights tucked into the corners, barely visible unless you were looking for them. But once you saw them, you couldn't unsee them. She stood in the middle of the living room, staring at one of those small red lights as it blinked in steady rhythm. Blink, pause, blink, like a heartbeat, but not hers. Behind her, James spoke calmly, as if nothing had changed. He told her it was just precaution. His tone was steady, controlled, the same tone he used whenever he believed he was doing the right thing. Olivia didn't turn around. She asked him what exactly they were taking precautions for. He paused before answering, as if the truth didn't need repeating. He said she already knew. That answer didn't help. It didn't comfort her. It only made everything heavier. When she finally turned to face him, her expression had shifted. She reminded him that he said people were getting closer, but she hadn't expected that to mean turning her life into something she no longer recognized. James stepped forward carefully, as if approaching something fragile. He told her it wouldn't be like this for long, but that wasn't the point. Her eyes moved toward the window, then toward the sensors. She told him they were outside, and now they were inside too. And through it all, he hadn't asked her. That was the part that mattered most. He said he was trying to protect her. She told him that protection without choice wasn't protection. That silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of truth neither of them could deny. From the other room, her child's laughter echoed softly. Light, carefree, untouched by everything that was changing. For a brief moment, that sound brought something close to normal. But it didn't last. Later that afternoon, Olivia stepped outside. She needed air, space, something that didn't feel controlled. The sun was still up, the street looked exactly the same, but the feeling had changed completely. One of the men glanced at her. Not openly, not enough to draw attention, but enough for her to feel it. Another shifted position slightly as she walked further, his movement subtle but intentional. Her chest tightened. This wasn't safety. This was surveillance. She stopped walking and turned back slowly. Every step she took felt observed, measured, tracked. Even the silence around her felt different, like it was listening. Inside the house, James stood near the window, watching her. Not with control, not in his mind at least. To him, it was protection. Necessary. Justified. But that distinction no longer mattered. When Olivia walked back inside, she didn't look at him right away. Her mind was already racing ahead of her words. Then she asked him how long. He didn't understand at first, so she clarified. How long did she have to live like this? The question settled heavily between them. James didn't have an answer. And that was the answer. She told him quietly that she couldn't live this way. There was no anger in her voice now, only exhaustion. He said he just needed time. But she reminded him that he already had time, and he didn't use it to tell her the truth. That was where it always came back to. Not the danger, not the security, the truth. He insisted that he was telling her now. But she shook her head because to her it wasn't the same. When she finally looked at him, the distance between them was clearer than ever. She told him he was still deciding everything. Where they stayed, how they lived, who watched them, while she was expected to simply accept it. Her voice never rose, but every word carried weight. And then she asked the question that changed everything. Was she supposed to trust that this was for the best? James stepped closer, tried to reach her, tried to hold on to something that was already slipping. He said he was doing what he had to do. She answered that she was the one paying for it. that stopped him completely. Because she was right. The room felt smaller after that. The blinking sensors, the reinforced locks, the silent presence outside. It all closed in at once. Nothing about this felt like safety anymore. It felt controlled, restricted, like her life had been taken out of her hands without her permission. She lowered her voice, almost to a whisper, and admitted the truth she had been trying to avoid. She hadn't asked to be part of any of this. But now, she wasn't sure she could leave it either. And that was the moment everything shifted. Because for the first time, Olivia didn't just feel unprotected. She felt trapped. The tension didn't explode. It built, slowly, quietly, until there was no space left for anything else. By the third day, the routine had changed completely. Not openly, not dramatically, but enough for Olivia to feel it in every movement she made. She woke up earlier than usual. Not because she wanted to, because she couldn't sleep. Every small sound pulled her awake. A car door outside. Footsteps passing too close. The faint click of something electronic shifting. Even silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt watched. She sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, her thoughts running in circles she couldn't escape. This wasn't her life. This wasn't the future she had fought for. And yet, here she was, living inside something she didn't choose. From the other room, she could hear movement. James, always awake before her, always alert, always in control. That thought alone made something tighten in her chest. When she stepped into the living space, he was already there, standing near the window, scanning outside like he had done every morning since they arrived. "You didn't sleep," he said without turning. It wasn't a question. "No," Olivia replied. A pause followed. "You should try," he added. That was enough. Something in her snapped. Not loudly, not violently, but completely. "You're doing it again." Her voice cut through the room. Sharp, clear. James turned slowly. "Doing what?" She let out a breath, but it wasn't calm. It was controlled frustration, the kind that had been building for too long. "Acting like you know what's best for me," she said. "That's not what I'm doing." "It is," she replied immediately. She stepped closer now, her eyes locked onto his. "You decide when I sleep, when I stay inside, when I go out, who's around me." Her voice didn't rise, but didn't need to. "And then you call it protection." Silence. James held her gaze, but something in his expression shifted. Not anger, not defensiveness. Recognition. "I'm trying to keep you safe," he said again. "That's the problem," she answered. A beat. "You're trying to control everything." The word landed heavily. Control. James shook his head slightly. "That's not what this is." Olivia let out a small, disbelieving laugh. "Then what is it?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Because there wasn't a simple answer. And she saw that. "You don't even hear yourself," she continued. "You make decisions. You act. You set everything in motion, and then you explain it after." Another step closer. "That's not protection, James." Her voice softened slightly, but it became more dangerous. "That's manipulation." The word hung between them. Heavy. Unavoidable. James's jaw tightened. "I would never manipulate you." "But you already have," she replied. Silence. She didn't look away. Didn't give him space to escape the truth. "You came into my life without telling me who you were." That was different. "No," she said firmly. "It's the same." Her voice steadied, but her eyes revealed everything she had been holding back. "You decided what I deserved to know." A pause. "You decided what was better for me." Another pause. "And now you're doing it again." James stepped forward, his voice lowering slightly. "I didn't have a choice." "You always have a choice," she said. Her words came faster now. Not rushed, but driven. "You just chose not to trust me with it." That cut deeper than anything else. Because it was true, and they both knew it. The air between them felt tight, like it could break at any second. From the hallway, the child's presence lingered quietly, unseen but close enough to feel. Olivia lowered her voice slightly, but the intensity didn't fade. "You don't get to decide my life," she said. "I'm not trying to take that from you. But you already have." That stopped him. Completely. Because there was no arguing with that. The locks. The cameras. The people outside. None of it had been her choice. And now, she was living inside it. "I didn't ask for any of this," she added quietly. Her voice finally cracked slightly. Not the danger. Not the lies. Not this. She gestured around the room. Everything about it felt temporary. Controlled. Like it didn't belong to her. James took another step closer, but this time, she stepped back. That one movement changed everything. It wasn't distance. It was rejection. I'm trying to fix it, he said. You can't fix it like this, she replied. A long silence followed. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. Because they both understood what was happening. This wasn't just an argument. This was a breaking point. Olivia looked at him for a long moment. Really looked at him. And what she saw wasn't simple anymore. Not the man she helped. Not the man she trusted. Something more complicated. Something she didn't fully understand. And that scared her more than anything else. I can't keep doing this, she said quietly. Her voice had lost its edge now, but it carried something heavier. Finality. James felt it immediately. What are you saying? He asked. She hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. I'm saying, she started. Her eyes dropped briefly, then lifted again. Clear. I need space. The words landed harder than anything else she had said. Because this time, she wasn't reacting. She was deciding. James didn't move, didn't argue, because he knew pushing now would only make it worse. Olivia turned slightly, her gaze drifting toward the door, toward the outside, toward something uncertain. But at least, it would be hers. And in that moment, for the first time since everything began, she considered it. Leaving again. The evening had started like a rare kind of peace. For the first time in days, the house didn't feel like it was holding its breath. Olivia noticed it in small things. The way the curtains moved without tension. The way the silence didn't feel sharp anymore. Even her own footsteps in the hallway sounded less like warning signs and more like routine. Outside, the sky was fading into a soft orange blur, the kind of sunset that made danger feel impossible, even when it wasn't. Her child was in the garden, laughing. That was the sound Olivia had started to fear losing the most. Not arguments, not money, not even James Dean's secrets. Just that sound. For a moment, she let herself believe maybe things were finally settling. Maybe James had overreacted. Maybe the threats weren't as close as he said. Maybe they could finally breathe again. But upstairs, James wasn't relaxed. He stood by the window, still, watching too carefully. His eyes tracked every movement beyond the property line. Every car that slowed. Every shadow that didn't move the way it should. Olivia noticed him eventually. You're doing it again, she said quietly. James didn't look away from the window. I stopped doing it once, he replied. That's why you're still in danger. Before she could respond, a voice from the garden called out. Mom, look. The child ran across the grass, holding something small and broken. Something meaningless like kids always do when they think it matters. Olivia smiled despite herself. It was brief, almost fragile. And then it happened. Not loudly, not dramatically, just wrong. A car that had been passing the street slowed down. Too slow. Olivia didn't notice at first, but James did. His posture changed instantly. Olivia, he said sharply. That tone alone erased the peace in the room. What? She turned. But he was already moving. Down the stairs. Fast. Get inside. Now. The child was still outside. Still laughing. Still unaware. Olivia rushed to the window, just in time to see it. A man had stepped out of the slowed car. Not rushing. Not panicked. Deliberate. He wasn't looking at the house. He was looking at the child. James, what is that? Olivia's voice cracked without permission. James was already halfway to the door. Don't look. Move. Now. But Olivia couldn't move. Something in her froze between disbelief and recognition. Because this didn't feel like coincidence anymore. It felt planned. The man took one step closer to the garden gate. Just one. And the child, still unaware, turned slightly. Still smiling. Still innocent. Then James was outside. The shift was immediate. Like the atmosphere itself changed pressure. James didn't shout. Didn't panic. He just arrived in the space like someone who already knew how this would end if he didn't act. The man paused, just for a fraction of a second. That was enough. He looked at James, and something passed between them. Something Olivia couldn't hear, but could feel even through the glass. Recognition. Fear. or history. Then the man backed away, slowly, carefully, like he had miscalculated something expensive. He returned to the car and drove off. No chase, no chaos, no sound except tires on gravel. But nothing about it felt over. Inside, Olivia finally ran. She grabbed the child first, pulling them inside so fast it almost didn't feel real. "Are you okay?" she kept asking, over and over, scanning for anything wrong. The child nodded, confused. "I was just playing." James came in last. He closed the door behind him with a quiet certainty that didn't match the situation. And that silence was worse than panic. Olivia turned on him immediately. "What was that?" she demanded. "Tell me there was nothing. Tell me you're just being paranoid again." James didn't answer right away. He looked at the door, then the window, then finally at her. "That wasn't nothing," he said. The words landed heavier than anything she had heard before. Olivia's throat tightened. "So, it was real." James nodded once. "They found us." Her grip tightened around the child without her realizing. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not possible. We've been careful. We've been inside. You've been exposed." James cut in quieter now. "Because of me." That stopped her. For the first time, his voice wasn't defensive. It was certain, and that certainty was worse. Olivia looked at him, searching for the old doubt she used to feel when he spoke like this. But it wasn't there anymore, because now there was proof. Not theories, not warnings. A car, a man, a choice not taken, only because James stepped in on time. Her mind replayed it again. Slowed car, watching eyes. The moment the man saw James and changed his decision. And suddenly, everything she had been arguing against started collapsing into place. Her voice dropped. "You knew this would happen." James didn't deny it. "I knew they would come eventually," he said. "I just didn't know when." The room felt smaller. He looked at the child now, softer but heavier. "And I tried to keep it away from you for as long as I could." Olivia's breath shook. For days, she had been fighting him, questioning him, doubting every warning. And now, a car had stopped outside her home. For her child. She looked down slowly, still holding them close. Then back at James. And for the first time, the truth began to land. Not as words, but as consequence. Her voice barely came out. "You were right." And the moment she said it, it was already too late. The house didn't feel safe anymore. Even after the car disappeared. Even after the doors were locked. Even after the silence returned. Because now, the silence meant something else. It wasn't peace. It was warning. Olivia stood in the center of the living room, her arms wrapped tightly around her child, as if letting go, even slightly, would allow the world to reach in and take something from her. Her eyes kept drifting to the windows, the driveway, the street beyond. Nothing moved, but she no longer trusted stillness. James stood a few steps away, not pacing, not speaking, just watching, waiting, like he knew this moment had been coming long before she did. Olivia finally turned toward him. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried something sharper than anger. "No more half-truths," she said. "No more warnings without answers." She took a step closer. "No more trust me while you keep me in the dark." A pause. "This ends now." The words settled heavily between them. James exhaled slowly, then motioned gently toward the hallway. The child hesitated for a second, sensing something in the air, before quietly walking away. The sound of the door closing echoed louder than it should have. Now it was just them, and the truth. James sat down, not like a man in control, like a man finally done running. "I didn't leave because I wanted to," he said. Olivia didn't respond. "I left because I had to disappear." Her expression hardened. "That's not an answer." "It is," he replied quietly. "You just don't have the rest of it yet." He looked down briefly, then back up. "I wasn't just someone who owed money," he continued. "That was the version you saw. The simple version. The one that made everything else easier to ignore." Olivia frowned. "What are you talking about?" James held her gaze. "I used to work inside systems you don't get to walk away from." The room felt smaller. "What systems?" she asked. His voice lowered slightly. "The kind that control information, money, outcomes." Quietly, without being seen. Olivia shook her head, disbelief mixing with frustration. That still doesn't explain why someone would come after you like that. James leaned forward slightly. Because I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. The words slowed the air around them. A transfer network, he continued. Money moving through accounts that shouldn't exist. Connecting people who should never be connected. Olivia's eyes narrowed. And you just walked away from that? No, James said. I copied it. That landed differently. And once they realized I had it, he added, I wasn't someone who could walk away anymore. Silence filled the room. I didn't just leave, James said, his voice quieter now. I was erased. Olivia felt that word. Not as explanation. As impact. She took a step back. So this is real, she whispered. It's real, he said. And it didn't end when I disappeared. Her throat tightened. And now us. James didn't hesitate. When I came back into your life, you became visible again. The meaning hit harder this time. You brought this to us, she said, her voice shaking. I brought it back, he corrected gently. It was always there, just not close enough to touch you. Olivia turned away, running a hand through her hair, trying to steady herself. This doesn't make sense, she said. You're telling me there are people, real people, watching us, tracking us, because of something you saw? I'm telling you they don't leave loose ends, James said. That sentence landed like a weight. Olivia looked down at her hands, at the child who had almost been taken, at how close it had come. Her voice dropped. How long? Since I left, James answered. And now? Since I came back. That was the moment everything connected. The arguments, the control, the tension she couldn't explain. It wasn't just him. It was everything surrounding him. You knew this could happen, she said. I knew it would, he replied. Eventually. Her breath caught. And you still came back? James didn't answer immediately. Because this part didn't need explanation. It needed honesty. Yes. The simplicity of it made it heavier. Olivia closed her eyes briefly. For days, she had been fighting him, pushing against him, accusing him of control, of manipulation, of hiding things. And now, she understood. Not everything, but enough. Enough to know this wasn't about control. It was about survival. She turned back slowly. If I stay, she said carefully, what happens? James didn't soften it. Then you're part of it. No hesitation. No comfort. Just truth. Olivia absorbed that. Not emotionally. Logically. Because this wasn't a feeling anymore. It was a decision. Her eyes moved toward the hallway. Where her child was. Safe. For now. Then back to James. You're asking me to step into something I don't understand, she said. I'm asking you to choose with the truth, he replied. A long silence followed. Then James stood. I won't force you, he said. I never wanted to. He stepped back slightly, giving her space. Not control. Not pressure. Choice. Real choice. The kind that changes everything. Olivia stood there, caught between two realities. One where she walks away, tries to rebuild something normal, something distant from all of this. And one where she stays, and faces something she can't fully see yet. Her heart pulled one way. Her fear pulled another. And somewhere in between was the truth. Her lips parted slightly. But the answer didn't come. Because this wasn't just about trust anymore. It was about consequence. And whatever she chose next would decide everything. Stay, or walk away forever. The silence stretched longer than either of them expected. Not empty. Not uncertain, but heavy like the world itself was waiting for Olivia to decide what kind of life she was willing to live. She stood still in the center of the room, her eyes fixed somewhere beyond James, beyond the walls, beyond the moment, trying to see a future that no longer looked the same. Moments ago, everything had been simple. Painful, yes. Confusing, yes. But still understandable. Now, nothing was simple anymore. Because now she knew, not just pieces, not just instincts, the truth. And the truth had weight. Her chest rose slowly as she breathed in, steadying herself. If I walk away, she said quietly, almost to herself, does it end? James didn't answer immediately, because he understood the question behind the question. Not distance, not space, safety. Finally he spoke. No. The word landed softly, but it didn't need force. It carried certainty. Olivia's eyes closed for a brief second. She nodded slightly. as if something inside her had already expected that answer. They'll still know I exist, she continued. Yes. They'll still see me as connected to you. Yes. A pause. And the child? James hesitated for the first time. Just a fraction. But she saw it. And that hesitation told her everything she needed to know. Her voice dropped. So there's no version of this where we're untouched. James shook his head slowly. There isn't. That was it. The illusion of escape gone. Olivia let out a quiet breath, but it wasn't panic. It was clarity. Because fear is loud when you don't understand what's happening. But once the truth settles, fear becomes direction. She turned away from him, walking slowly toward the window. The same window she had stood at earlier. The same place where everything changed. Outside, the street looked normal. Still, almost peaceful. But now she could see it differently. Not as safety, as exposure. She rested her hand lightly against the glass. For a long moment, she said nothing. And James didn't interrupt. Because this decision didn't belong to him. It never did. I spent so much time thinking you were the problem, Olivia said finally, her voice steady but distant. James didn't respond. I thought if I pushed back hard enough, if I questioned everything, if I kept control over my life, she continued, I could fix what felt wrong. She let out a quiet, almost humorless breath. But it was never just you. Her fingers pressed slightly against the glass. It was everything around you. James lowered his gaze slightly. Not in shame, in understanding. Olivia turned back slowly. Her expression had changed. The fear was still there, but it wasn't leading anymore. Now, there was something else. Resolve. You should have told me earlier, she said. I know, James replied. I might have still been angry, she added. I know, but at least I would have been choosing with the truth. That lingered between them, because that was what this moment was really about. Choice. Not forced. Not manipulated. Real. Olivia took a step closer, then another, closing the distance that had existed between them for so long. For days, I thought you were trying to control me, she said. James didn't interrupt. And maybe you were in your own way, she added honestly. But now I see why. She paused in front of him. You weren't trying to control me. Her voice softened. You were trying to protect something you thought you were going to lose. James's jaw tightened slightly. Not defensively, emotionally, because that was the first time she had said it out loud. And meant it. A quiet silence followed. Then Olivia asked the question that mattered most. If I stay, we don't get a normal life, do we? James met her eyes. No. No hesitation. No false comfort. Just truth. She nodded slowly. And if I leave? He didn't answer this time, because they both already knew. There was no real leaving anymore. Olivia looked toward the hallway again. Toward the child. Her child. The one thing in her life that had always been simple. Pure. Worth everything. And suddenly, the decision became clearer. Not easier, but clearer. Because this wasn't about James. Not really. It was about what kind of danger she was willing to face. And how she was willing to face it. Alone. Or not. She turned back to him fully now. Her shoulders straightened slightly. Not out of confidence. Out of acceptance. You said something earlier, she began. James waited. You said if I stay, I'll become part of it. I did. Olivia held his gaze. Then I need you to understand something too. A small pause. I'm not staying because I believe in your world. Another pause. I'm staying because I believe in the truth you finally told me. That hit differently. James didn't speak. Couldn't. Because this wasn't about convincing her anymore. She had already crossed that line on her own. And I'm not staying because of money, she continued. Or because I feel trapped. Her voice steadied further. I'm staying because walking away doesn't protect us. A beat. And standing alone doesn't make me stronger. Now her eyes softened slightly. But standing with the truth. She exhaled slowly. That's the only thing that makes sense now. The room felt different. Not safer, but aligned. Like the tension had finally chosen a direction. James stepped forward slightly. Careful. Measured. Not to take control, but to meet her where she stood. You don't fully understand what you're stepping into, he said quietly. I don't, she admitted. A pause. But I understand enough. That was all that mattered. Not certainty. Not clarity. Enough truth to choose. Olivia glanced once more toward the hallway, then back at him. Her voice came softer now, but stronger than it had ever been. We don't run from this anymore. James held her gaze. Something unspoken passed between them. Not relief. Not victory. Something deeper. Partnership. Olivia took one final step forward, closing the last distance between them. And this time, she didn't stop. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the entire room, through everything that had happened, through everything that was coming. Then we faced this together. The night didn't arrive quietly. It pressed in, heavy, intentional, like darkness itself had chosen a side. Inside the house, everything had shifted. Not the walls, not the structure, but the people inside it. Olivia no longer flinched at silence. She studied it, measured it, because now she understood. Fear wasn't something to escape. It was something to read. James stood near the monitor, eyes scanning the security feed one last time. They won't wait, he said. Olivia leaned against the table, steady. How do you know? Because they already came once, he replied. That wasn't an attempt. A pause. It was confirmation. The words settled heavily. They know where we are, she said. Yes. And now they'll come properly. James didn't respond. He didn't need to. Olivia straightened. What's the plan? James turned toward her. This time, he didn't hesitate. We don't stay here. If we wait, we lose control. Then we choose where this happens, she said. A flicker of approval crossed his face. Yes. A pause. You stay close. You don't react unless I say. And whatever happens. He held her gaze. They don't separate us. Olivia nodded. I understand. The location was empty. Deliberately so. An abandoned structure just beyond the city's edge, where sound didn't travel and no one asked questions. The drive, there was quiet. Not tense. Focused. Olivia stared ahead, her thoughts sharper than ever. Fear was still there, but it wasn't leading anymore. Beside her, James drove with precision, every movement controlled. When they arrived, the air felt wrong. Too still. They're here, James said. Olivia felt it too. Not seen, but present. They stepped out. The cold hit first. Then, movement. Figures emerging from shadow, one by one. Calm. Organized. Not rushed. At the center, one man stepped forward. Composed. Measured. In control. His eyes moved from James to Olivia, then back again. Recognition. You disappeared well, the man said. But not well enough. James stepped forward. End it, he said. No introduction. No hesitation. The man's lips curved slightly. If it were that simple, we wouldn't be here. A subtle shift behind him. More men. Waiting. You took something that doesn't belong to you, the man continued. I exposed something that shouldn't exist, James replied. A flicker of interest. Perspective, the man said softly. His gaze returned to Olivia. She wasn't supposed to be part of this. James's voice sharpened. She still isn't. That's not how proximity works. Silence stretched. Then, give it back. The words were quiet. Final. James didn't hesitate. I don't have it. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Not louder. Sharper. Then you're less valuable than we thought, the man said. Movement behind him. Ready now. James stepped forward again. Closer. Risking distance. Then this ends here. It ends when we decide, the man replied. And then, everything moved. Fast. Precise. Violence without chaos. James reacted first, intercepting the nearest threat before it reached him. Controlled. Efficient. Every movement deliberate. Olivia stayed back. Watching. Learning. This wasn't random. This was trained. And James, he wasn't just holding his ground. He was matching them. But there were more of them. And numbers mattered. One broke formation. Moved toward Olivia. That was the mistake. James saw it instantly. Reacted without hesitation. Too fast. Too far. For a brief second, he was exposed. The central figure moved. Not rushed. Calculated. A shift so small it almost went unnoticed. But it changed everything. Olivia saw it. Too late. James! Impact. Not loud, but final. James staggered. Just enough. Enough to shift the balance. The fight slowed. Not stopped, but altered. The man stepped forward again. Calm. Untouched. You always choose the emotional variable, he said. James steadied himself, still standing, but not unharmed. Olivia ran to him, instinct overriding everything. You're hurt. I'm fine, he said. But he wasn't. Not completely. The man studied them both, then made a decision. Small, controlled. He stepped back, and the others followed. No rush, no panic, just withdrawal. Into shadow, into silence. They disappeared the same way they came, leaving nothing behind, except consequence. Olivia tightened her grip on James. They're gone. James shook his head slightly. No. A pause. This wasn't about ending it tonight. The meaning settled in. This wasn't victory. It was a message. Olivia looked toward the darkness. What did we lose? She asked quietly. James didn't answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed where the man had stood, because he understood something she didn't. Not yet. That wasn't a retreat, he said finally. It was a decision. Olivia's chest tightened. What kind of decision? James exhaled slowly. The kind that comes with a cost. Silence returned. But it wasn't empty. It carried weight. Consequence. And something worse. Continuation. They had survived. But survival wasn't clean. And it wasn't final. James looked down briefly, then back into the darkness. Voice steady. Next time, they won't test us. Olivia didn't speak, because she understood now. This wasn't over. Not even close. And whatever came next would demand more than they had already given. The night closed in again, heavier than before, because now they knew exactly what they were facing. Victory, but at a cost. Morning didn't come all at once. It arrived slowly, like the world itself was unsure if it was safe to begin again. The light slipped through the curtains in thin lines, touching the edges of the room without fully claiming it. Nothing looked broken, but nothing felt the same. Olivia stood in the kitchen, her hands resting lightly against the counter, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. The house was quiet again, but this silence had changed. It no longer felt like something hiding. It felt like something recovering. Behind her, soft footsteps echoed down the hallway. Small, careful, familiar. She turned just as the child appeared, still half asleep, drawn by routine more than awareness. Is it over? The child asked quietly. The question lingered, not just in the air, but in everything Olivia had yet to fully process. She walked forward slowly, kneeling just enough to meet them at eye level. Her voice was soft, but honest. It's quiet, she said. A small pause. And we're safe right now. The child nodded, accepting the answer the way only children can, not needing certainty, just presence. Olivia pulled them into a gentle embrace, holding them for a moment longer than usual. Not out of fear, out of understanding, because safety wasn't something she would ever take for granted again. Across the house, James stood near the window. The same position, the same view, but not the same man. His posture was still alert, still aware, but there was something else beneath it now. Something quieter. Not control. Responsibility. The faint mark of last night's cost still lingered, subtle, but real. A reminder that survival always leaves something behind. He watched the street carefully. Every movement, every pause. But this time, he wasn't alone in carrying that weight. He heard her before he saw her. Olivia stepped into the room, her presence no longer hesitant, no longer distant. Just there, beside him, not behind, not away, together. They stood in silence for a moment, looking out at the same world, a world that hadn't changed, but now felt completely different. It's too quiet, she said softly. James nodded. It won't stay that way. She didn't argue, didn't question, because now she understood something she hadn't before. Peace wasn't permanent. It was temporary and fragile. But it's enough, she said after a moment. That made him look at her, not because of the words, but because of the meaning behind them. She wasn't asking for certainty anymore. She was accepting reality and choosing to stand in it anyway. A quiet breath passed between them, not tense, not uncertain, just shared. Later that day, the house felt lived in again. Small movements returned. Footsteps, voices, normal things. But even normal felt different now. Stronger, earned. The child laughed again, soft at first, then real. And this time, neither of them took it for granted. Olivia watched from across the room, her expression calm but thoughtful. Not untouched, but not broken either. She had changed, not into someone fearless, but into someone who understood fear, and chose to stand anyway. James moved more carefully now, not distant, just aware. Every action measured, every decision deliberate. But there was something new in the way he looked at her. Not guarded, not controlling, respectful, because she had made a choice he never expected her to fully understand. And she had made it anyway. That evening, the light shifted again. Golden, soft, almost like the world was offering something gentle after everything it had taken. Olivia stood near the window once more. The same place where doubt once lived. Now, something steadier. James approached slowly. Not imposing. Not closing space without reason. Just present. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Because words weren't always needed anymore. "We're not the same," Olivia said quietly. James didn't deny it. No. A pause. "But we're still here." That mattered more. Olivia turned slightly toward him. Her expression wasn't soft. Not completely. But it wasn't guarded either. It was real. "This doesn't fix everything," she continued. "I know. And it doesn't make things easy. I know." Another pause. Then, "But makes things honest." That was the difference. And it was enough. James nodded slowly. Because honesty was something neither of them could walk away from now. Not after everything. Olivia looked toward the hallway briefly. Then back at him. "We build this again," she said. Not a question. A decision. James held her gaze. "Slowly," he replied. "Yes." No rush. No illusion. Just something real. Something earned. The night returned. But it didn't feel as heavy as before. Not because the danger was gone, but because they were no longer facing it alone. Olivia stood beside him again, their shoulders nearly touching. Not distant. Not uncertain. Just aligned. Outside, the street remained quiet. Still. Almost too still. James's eyes lingered there a moment longer than usual. Not fear. Instinct. Olivia noticed. "You see something?" she asked. A brief pause. Then he shook his head. Not yet. That word stayed between them. Not yet. Because they both knew. This wasn't the end. It was a pause. A breath between moments. But this time, they were ready for it. Together. Olivia exhaled softly. Then, without hesitation, she reached for his hand. Not out of weakness. Not out of fear. But choice. He didn't pull away. Didn't tighten his grip either. He simply met it. Equal. Steady. Real. And as they stood there, looking out at a world that had already changed them, the silence settled one last time. Not empty. Not threatening. But aware. Because somewhere beyond what they could see, something was still moving. Still watching. Still waiting. And this time, they would be ready. Peace restored. But never the same. Thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story. Like, share, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe for more interesting stories. See you all in our next story.